Tired of fantasy literature that caters only to wine-ounts and activists? Tired of love triangles and unlikable girl bosses? Tired of propaganda disguised as entertainment? If so, check the Guilds of Avlaan series, a series like no other ever written in the Western market, with cute and funny female leads and dashing male protagonists. This series is full of adventure and exciting landscapes. Do not let others decide what you enjoy. Look for what you enjoy. If you are interested, the link is in the description.
Hello, Leonardo Cornejo here, and today I want to talk about something that I had to address. To be honest, I had to address it because otherwise there will still be discourse about it regarding myself. First of all, the title of the video is not to attack Liquid Zulu. It's not personal. I don't want to attack him. I don't want to insult him, even though I don't like him, and it's related to why I'm making this video that I don't like him. I don't want to attack him. I don't want to direct any hostility at him. And the title of the video comes from the fact that whenever I address this topic, people bring up Liquid Zulu's video, which is the reason I don't like him, by the way. People bring up Liquid Zulu's points, people bring up Liquid Zulu's views on the matter, and I'm a bit tired about it. And I think the best way to make it clear that I already heard what he had to say is putting him in the title of the video. It's not personal, it's not against him. I don't want to attack him, I don't want anything bad towards him at the moment. I don't have reasons to want anything bad towards him at the moment. I just want to make it clear that I already watched his video, and that my position came up after watching his videos, and I don't agree with him at all pertaining intellectual property. And that's hold on a second. Alright, my apologies. Back to what I was saying, because well, I had to. My cat was asking me to let him in. I had to let him in because, unlike Hassan Piker, I actually care about my pets, and I was not going to electrocute him for interrupting my video. Back to what I was saying. I want to make it clear that I already watched Liquid Zulu's video, and that I disagree with him on intellectual property. That's basically the reason behind the title. And now entering to what is the core of the video. Because I was watching a video about Mentis Wave, who I disagree specifically on this with him, on where he mentioned intellectual property, and he mentioned a debate Liquid Zulu had with someone else over the issues with intellectual property, and I liked the proposal Mentis Wave established as compromise. I want to address my points, readdress some of my points, and elaborate on my views regarding Mentis Wave's proposal, and the parts I agree with and the parts I disagree with. First of all, I will say it. I think it's impossible to get rid of all forms of intellectual property laws entirely, but I do think we need reforms. I have my proposals for such reforms. I will say it. I think trademarks must go. Trademarks shouldn't exist. And patents, you would need to prove that they are innovative enough, that there is no precedent of something similar, And I think basically I think patents would need to be a lot more strict, a lot harder to get, and a lot harder to keep. And I think in general that intellectual property should follow a rule of if you lose it, if you don't use it, you lose it. Which is where I agree strongly with Mentis Wave in that regard, that if you are basically not using something that is considered intellectual property, be it a patent, be it copyright, which is for creative works specifically, I think they should go. You should lose the rights to that thing. If you don't use it, you lose it. I think that's how it should be. If you are no longer profiting from, for example, if you and that's where I think in specifically for copyright where you should lose it. If you are not profiting from a character, if you are not working on that character anymore, basically if you leave something abandoned, like for example lost media, like for example in the case of video games, all these video games that are no longer sold, that are abandoned, where in the case of brands, for example, let's put an example, Spectropes, which is a brand that has been entirely abandoned by Disney, and they are just sitting on the IP without doing nothing. They should lose it. And I think the lose it part should be harsher on companies. I think copyright for people should be lifetime, as long as you are making money out of it. For example, let's say if you, for example, J.K. Rowling, she should be allowed to profit from. She should be allowed to keep the intellectual property rights or the copyright of Harry Potter, of all the books, of all the 7 books, until she dies, or until she stops making money out of them. Basically, when she starts giving them away, they become public domain. But not if she's giving them away all the 1 or 2 books or one part of the brand. No. If she basically abandons it, if she basically says, I no longer care about Harry Potter, do with Harry Potter whatever you want, that's when it should go to public domain, because the author is no longer caring about it. But if the author is still selling, still making money out of it, I think that's when the authors should be allowed to keep their copyright for life, as long as they live. And that's the part I disagree with Mentis Wave about, because what he says is that companies profit, that specifically using record labels as examples, that record labels make more money in the first years of release of a disc, that publishers make more money in the first years of release of anything. But that's companies, not individuals. Small creators in particular, people like me, can take decades before making a cent. It took me about 5 years before making decent profits from my books. I published the first book in 2018, and decent profits only arrived last year, or about 2023 at best. It took me years, and I'm not making a huge success. I'm still making more money out of other things, so I can't make a living entirely from books yet. So since I know it takes a while before you can make writing a full-time job, I strongly disagree with the copyright terms being shorter for individuals. That's where I go. For individuals, for the person, for the creator, for the author, for independent developers, for independent artists, for independent for independent creators in general, for illustrators who work on their own, for musicians who work on their own, for people who don't have the backing of a company capable of promoting their work, and for people whose work is not held by a company. For example, J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling has her publishers and all these people, but she's the owner of the work. Another example, basically every mangaka. All mangaka, they are the authors and the company is just a publisher. If the author decides to move on to another publisher or even start their own publishing company or whatever, they get to keep the IP. And that's, for example, and they actually have fought for that right. For example, Takehiro Yuki, and I don't remember the name of the author of Such Bell. They fought for the IP because the publishers wanted to keep the IP, which was not theirs, it was the authors. And that's why now you have a sequel to Konjiki no Gash after years of the original manga ending, because now the author is going on his own with his project, with his IP. And that's an example of what I am talking about. A mangaka get to keep the copyright of their work, then they get to keep it for life. The company, the publisher, loses it once they stop using it. That's my point. Companies should lose it. No terms, no 50 years, no after release, no 20 years after release. If you stop using it, you lose it. And if you are sharing it with a creator, the creator keeps it, but you lose it. And that's, for example, for manga, an example. If the author has the IP and the publisher has the publishing rights and is making money from the manga, things stay that way. Basically, both are agreeing on sharing the IP. But the moment that the mangaka moves away from that publisher, or the publisher stops making money and giving money to the author from that IP, they lose the rights and they go back entirely to the author, who can decide what to do with the IP, and they can release it on their own. Basically, go independent completely, even re-releasing the old tomes on their own without the publisher. The publisher loses the publishing rights the moment they stop publishing. Fuck publishers, by the way. That's how I put it. And regarding commissions, and this is important because of a few controversies. This is basically a small sidetrack, a small tangent, because of something related to recent events in the furry community. Regarding commissions, the one commissioning is the one who should hold the IP entirely for commercial purposes too. Fuck the artist in that regard, because artists have become too abusive in that regard. If you are commissioning, the one commissioning you should be allowed to use that art as they please, be it illustration, be it music, be it writing, whatever. If you are getting commissioned, the one paying you is the boss, and you give the IP to the one paying you. Of course, that's where terms apply. Once this is specifically in the case the commission is for a project the person already, and this is, as I said, this should complicate things a lot. For when the person holds the IP, for example, if they are commissioning their own character, if they go around commissioning a Futa Renamon with 7 horse dicks, yeah, neither of you owns the copyright of that one. Fuck you, both. Neither of you owns the copyright. The character owner should own the copyright. The project owner should own the copyright. And this is, for example, when they commission music for a video game. This is where it gets complicated. If a dev team commissions music for a video game, The dev team owns the copyright. The musician enters in a state of either co-ownership if they join the dev team, or just an employee, a temporary employee. But the copyright is owned by the dev team. That's how I put it. If you are working on your own IP, or in any shape or form the commission is connected to your own IP, you should own the rights to the project, because you are already paying the person. If you commission for something like fan art of someone else's IP, yeah, you need to understand the concept of fair use. I will put it that way. I want to be really friendly to fair use in my idea, but my point is, shortening the terms of copyright for individuals is a terrible idea. For small teams is a terrible idea, because they don't have the advantages of large companies. But for large companies, it should be, if you don't use it, you lose it. And you should take into account the potential of that company or individual to promote their work. So basically, Disney should lose plenty of IPs that they are just sitting on right now, and they should go to public domain or return to their original creators. Your choice. Your choice. You return them to your original creators, who often go uncredited because you take the credit as company, or you send them to public domain. But you can't keep the IP someone else made. And that's my point. I want an intellectual property model designed to benefit creators, to benefit individuals, not to benefit companies. And I strongly disagree with the idea of abolishing specifically copyright entirely. And I think it's a communist mind virus that has infested the libertarian mindset, because they actually think, and this is why I think it's a communist mind virus, that it is for the greater good, that it benefits the majority, and that everyone will agree, and that anyone who disagrees is an enemy. No, we're not enemies. We just don't trust people. I don't trust anyone but myself. Not even my relatives, not even my friends. I really don't have trust towards anyone but myself. I distrust everyone because I had bad experiences. And for that same reason, and for the reason that there is a bastard out there and I suspect to know who it is. This fucking coward who doesn't reveal himself. But I suspect to know who it is. Who constantly is using my characters to promote woke agenda propaganda, and even mocking the death of Charlie Kirk. That's why I don't want my characters to become public domain. That's why I don't want my characters to be available to everyone for profit, to use as they please. I know the current system of copyright is a fucking clusterfuck. It's disgusting, it's bad, it's dysfunctional, and it's built by evil people, because it's built by corporations who are leftists. But I don't think making everything public domain will fix something. I do think authors should be allowed to consign their work to public domain voluntarily, and I do think, as I said, that we need punitive measures to prevent the abuse of intellectual property laws, and to prevent companies from basically sitting on an IP forever. But I don't think sending everything to public domain, not having copyright, giving everyone the right to profit from the work of others without making anything of their own is a good idea. I consider the fruit of my labor to be my books, the finished product. I don't own the ideas. I don't own the idea of a red-haired wolf lolly, but I own the character of Ruwa, because I wrote her, because it was a creative process which included research, which included time and effort. And even though effort doesn't really add value, effort does add property. That's the important part. Effort doesn't add value, but it does add property, which is different. And I consider the model of copyright I consider ideal to be an extension of property, to be an extension of property rights. And you say, you don't own the idea. No, I own the book. I own the book. And I'm not talking about the physical book. I own the words written there because I created them, because I worked on them, and you did not. Because I consider it as food. If you work the field and you grow the wheat, you can sell the wheat. But if you didn't grow the field and you didn't buy the wheat from someone else, you shouldn't be allowed to sell the wheat. And that's my problem with the idea that both Liquid Zulu and Mentis Wave share about abolishing copyright entirely. Because I think we who are plowing the field, who are growing the seeds, we are the ones who should reap the benefits. But I don't want some clusterfuck haters selling my books to profit from them. And I have that hater, that retarded hater who has been harassing me and stalking me for a few months. I don't want that bastard profiting from my work. I don't want him plagiarizing my work. That's why I can't tolerate copyright infringement, because I have dealt with it. You have not dealt with it. You probably don't understand why it bothers me so much. But once you deal with it, at least right now he can only hide himself behind the fair use argument, saying it's parody, it's plagiarism, but he can't hide behind that because he's not profiting from my work. But when he tries to profit from my work, I can actually go after him and say, no, you're a plagiarist. So I want to have that power. As I said in my previous video talking about this, it's not that I want to fuck other people over out of nowhere, or that I want to monopolize ideas, as you say. No. It's that I want to have the right to fuck people over when they try to profit from my work and damage me. It's that I want to have countermeasures to when people try to damage me. So, since we all don't agree, we can't abolish copyright. But we can have a compromise, and the compromise is the idea I proposed. If you don't use it, you lose it, but without harming creators. Focused on limiting the power of corporations, on limiting what corporations can do with intellectual property. I think corporations shouldn't even have intellectual property to begin with, because corporations don't have a mind. They are not individuals, they are not persons, they don't think, therefore they don't have intellectual effort. They have people who did the intellectual effort, and they should be the owners of intellectual property. And if they want to hold the intellectual property, they need to use it, or they lose it in the case of corporations. Entirely, immediately. If after a year or two they haven't used it, there it goes. Back to the creator or to the public domain. You choose. But no, you can't basically ask creators to self-sacrifice for the greater good. That's a communist thing, and that's where I disagree with Mentis Wave, and I don't want to make an enemy out of him, but I can't agree with him on this one. This is entirely irreconcilable, and that's where I can't agree with Liquid Zulu, and why I don't like Liquid Zulu, because he's more of a hardliner, because at least Mentis Wave admits there must be a compromise, because he knows we are not going to agree on this one. It's not something everyone is going to agree on. And that's an important part. If you can't acknowledge that not everyone is going to agree with you on this one, it's because it has communist traits. Remember that communists can't acknowledge that people won't accept communism, that people will reject communism, and they try to force their utopian way upon others. That's why I think the idea of abolishing copyright has some communist inclinations in it. That's why I call it a communist mind virus, because if you can't acknowledge that there will be people who will say, no, I want to keep the things the way they are, I want to keep copyright, and therefore I don't want to be part of your law project, I don't want to be part of your country, of your ideals. And as Max Stirner said, if you don't agree with something, you have the obligation of leaving. I am not going to join your idea, I am not going to join your plan, I'm not going to support you. if you can understand that such people will exist, and for example that's me, I am that kind of people who will say, no, I don't want to abolish copyright, I won't support you in that part, and I will move with my own goals. Then if you obstruct my goals, I will move against you. If you can't acknowledge the individual interests, the people who individually won't support you, if you can't compromise with them, it's because the idea itself is a communist mind virus. It's a utopian idea. Utopian ideas are part of leftism. It's a leftist idea. By nature of its utopian, everyone must agree with or else position. I know this is unpopular, I know I might even lose fans, I know I might make enemies by saying this, but that's how I see it. Because not everyone agrees with it. Not everyone is on board. And I'm not convinced. No one has given me a convincing reason, and as I said, the title of this video is because everyone who tries to give me a convincing reason always goes to Liquid Zulu as reference. And I already saw those videos. I already know what Liquid Zulu has to say about it, and I don't agree with him, and it's not convincing me. I actually was not convinced because of Liquid Zulu. What I saw was basically utopianism and communism. And yes, that means, to me, Liquid Zulu is a fucking commie. I don't like him. I don't want to hurt him. I don't want to harm him. I don't want him to get harassed, but I don't like him because I think he has the spirit of a commie. Well, that's it for today. Have a nice day.